Jian Yao, did you know? Someone like me, I never expected love in this lifetime. I never thought there would be a woman willing to marry me. That was until I met you. The hallway lights were old and dim, flickering on and off from years of neglect, making one feel uneasy. Jian Yao was returning from her night shift, her hair still damp with rain. It was only early winter, but the cold was already biting. She figured she needed to save up quickly before the heavy snow came, to buy her daughter Guogua a new winter coat. As she was calculating in her mind, a door suddenly swung open, and a strong smell of alcohol hit her face. Hey, beautiful. 200 yuan for a night, how about it? Jian Yao froze for a moment before she snapped back to reality, quickly waving her hands. I am not. You've got the wrong person. She lowered her head and hurried away. This was an old, cheap apartment complex, and the tenants were a mixed bunch. Though she had lived here for a while, it was the first time she'd encountered something like this. Jian Yao's apartment was at the very end of the hallway, still a distance away. She clutched her bag tightly and wished she could fly home that instant. The drunk man, however, wasn't willing to let it go. He followed her out the door, slurring, "Stop pretending. I've been watching you for days. Coming back late every night. Who would believe you're not in that kind of business?" "You're mistaken. I work night shifts at a 24-hour convenience store. I'm really not like that." Jian Yao sped up without looking back. But the drunk man kept chasing her. "Quit lying. It's just about the price, right? How about I up it to 500 yuan for a night?" His coarse voice echoed down the hallway, and his large frame loomed like a beast ready to pounce on Jian Yao. "The hair salon owner behind us charges the same price." "Sure, you're prettier, but don't overestimate yourself. 500 for the night. Why the hell are you running?" With a furious curse, the drunk man kicked over a bag of trash in front of a tenant's door and chased after her with malicious intent. Jian Yao reached into her bag in panic. "Don't come any closer. I'll call the police." Her hands trembled as she fumbled between her phone and keys, her palms slick with sweat. The threat of calling the police seemed to enrage the drunk man further. He stomped forward, kicking trash aside, bellowing, "Call the cops, my ass. You better ask around who I am in this area, you ungrateful whore. Do you want me to take what I want by force?" Jian Yao broke into a desperate run, but before she could even pull out her phone or keys, she tripped and fell to the ground, screaming uncontrollably, "Help! Help!" The drunk man was almost on her. In that moment of utter despair, just one step away from her door, Jian Yao thought all hope was lost. Then, with a sudden click, the door across from her apartment swung open. A tall figure stood under the flickering light. His face was obscured in shadow, but his short, white hair shimmered with the icy chill of early winter. Like someone clinging to a lifeline, Jian Yao scrambled forward and clutched his pant leg, nearly in tears. "Please help me, please." The drunk man swayed, pointing a finger at the newcomer. "Old man, who the hell are you? I'm warning you. Stay out of this." Jian Yao's heart tightened. She was terrified the man across the hall, a neighbor she had never interacted with, would retreat in fear. She clung even tighter to his leg, pleading, "Sir, please, I have a child at home." The white-haired man shook off Jian Yao's hands and stepped forward. Her blood ran cold, her heart sinking with dread. Before she could fully comprehend her despair, he had already moved past her and positioned himself directly between her and the drunk man. The hallway lights flickered ominously, casting an eerie atmosphere. The tall figure didn't say a word, but stood there like a wall, offering silent protection. What's your problem?" The drunk man, unable to make out his face, felt a sudden wave of oppressive fear and instinctively took a step back. "Where the hell did you come from? Do you even know who I am?" A cold draft swept through the long hallway as the white-haired man finally spoke. His voice was much younger than expected, deep and resonant, like the clash of jade. "Just got out of prison."
His cold words echoed in the hallway.
The drunk man's face changed instantly, and the next sentence sent chills down his spine. "Murder." That was the first time Jian Yao had clearly seen Jikinglin's face. She and this neighbor across the hall had moved in around the same time, but they had never interacted. Occasionally, she would see him upstairs, pushing an old lady in a wheelchair for a walk beneath the trees. Jian Yao used to think they were an elderly couple. After all, with his snow-white short hair and tall, slender build, he looked like a retired soldier. If it weren't for tonight's rescue, Jian Yao would probably have continued thinking that way. The man crouched down and extended his hand to her. "Are you alright?" Their eyes met at close range. His face, beneath the white hair, was well-defined and sharp, with deep-set, firm features. Though it carried some traces of hardship, it didn't give off the feeling of old age. Instead, there was an undeniable mature charm about him. In the words of a certain type of artsy film, it was a face that was full of stories. Jian Yao stared blankly for a long time before finally placing her hand in his long, slender one. "That guy is a local thug. If you don't plan on moving, try to get home earlier after your night shifts. When there are more people around in the hallway, he won't dare do anything." The man picked up her bag, dusted it off, and handed it to her. Under the flickering lights, Jian Yao stammered, "I work night shifts at a convenience store. My boss sets the hours, so I can't come home any earlier." "What time do you usually get off?" "It depends on when my colleague shows up to relieve me. Sometimes it's 2 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m. The man nodded, his tone distant. "I see." With that, he turned and went back into his apartment, without sparing Jian Yao another glance. It wasn't until the old, iron door was almost shut that Jian Yao snapped out of it. She quickly stood on her toes and called out, "Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't even ask your name." A long pause passed before a low voice answered from inside. "Jikinglin." Jian Yao quietly washed up and sat beside her daughter's bed, finally allowing herself to fully relax. She gazed at her sleeping daughter for a long time, unmoving. Cold wind tapped against the window, and suddenly, she covered her face with her hands. The moisture seeped through her fingers, and her heart felt submerged in an ocean, both bitter and salty. Guoguo was so good, so obedient and understanding, but Jian Yao felt utterly powerless as a mother. She didn't even have the money to move them out of this place. Now that she had crossed the local thug, what was she going to do in the future? Was she really going to have to quit her convenience store job? In order to support herself and her child, Jian Yao worked in a large maternity and baby supply store during the day and took a second job at the convenience store at night. Her daughter was old enough to start kindergarten, so Jian Yao had her stay at school during lunch, only picking her up in the afternoon. She would cook dinner, help with homework, and watch her fall asleep before rushing off to her night shift. Day after day of hard work barely earned enough to make ends meet. If she really had to quit the convenience store job, she wouldn't even have enough for rent this month. Jian Yao stared out the window. The rain had been falling all night, leaving a layer of mist on the glass, turning it into a white, blurry expanse. Her eyes unfocused, she absent-mindedly drew a smiley face on the window, but it came out crooked and twisted, more like a crying face than a smile. This winter was so cold. Could she really save enough to buy Guoguo a new coat before the new year? Jian Yao finished her shift the next day at 3:30 in the morning. Her bag contained a bottle of pepper spray, and she was on edge with every step. The hallway lights above her continued to flicker as she climbed the stairs, and suddenly, she noticed a shadow blocking the stairwell entrance. Her heart shot to her throat, and she instinctively reached for her bag. Who's there?" "It's me." Under the flickering light, the man slowly stepped forward. A tall figure, deep-set features, and snow-white hair. Jian Yao's tense grip loosened immediately. The man walked up to her, frowning slightly. "Was your colleague late?" Jian Yao looked up at him, her eyelashes trembling. Her mind seemed slow to process what was happening. "Why you were waiting for me here? How long have you been waiting?" "Since 2 in the morning." "Let's go." The man cut her off and turned to walk up the stairs. It was still that long, dimly lit hallway, but this time they walked side by side. Jian Yao followed closely behind Jaikinglin, her heart more at peace than it had been in a long time. She stole a glance at him, and the words he had coldly thrown out last night echoed in her ears. Just got out of prison. Murder. His identity was truly shocking, but after thinking about it carefully, Jian Yao still found it hard to believe that her neighbor, who had saved her, could be an ex-convict, let alone a murderer. Despite his white hair, he wasn't very old, probably just over 30. That didn't align with the length of a prison sentence, and besides, he carried himself with such righteousness. Yes, righteousness was the word. He exuded an aura of uprightness and authority, the type that would make any petty crook think twice before crossing his path. Jian Yao was more inclined to believe that Jaikinglin was a retired soldier, not a murderer who had been in prison. Though her judgment in men hadn't been great, she had married someone like her ex-husband, Xia Fan. Years of navigating society had taught her how to tell the good guys from the bad. Maybe this kind-hearted neighbor had just made up that story to scare off the thug? Noticing her side glances, the tall figure pursed his lips, but said nothing. He simply walked her to her door, then turned and quickly shut the iron door of his own apartment behind him before Jian Yao could even thank him. What a strange man, Jian Yao thought to herself, but there was a faint smile on her face. The early winter rain continued to fall, but somehow, Jian Yao didn't feel as cold anymore. From that day on, she had a silent, guardian angel watching over her. The so-called local thug never appeared to bother her again. As for Jaikinglin, she didn't know what he did for a living. He seemed to be at home all the time, only coming out occasionally to push the elderly woman in the wheelchair around the neighborhood. Jian Yao knew nothing about him, yet she felt an inexplicable sense of trust toward him. Everything about him fascinated her. Finally, one evening after another late shift, Jian Yao mustered the courage to pull a steaming bag of food from her purse and offer it to Jaikinglin. This is a new corn roll from the shop today. It's really good, and I wrapped it in several layers, so it's still warm. Do you want to try some? Jaikinglin kept a cold expression on his face, entirely oblivious to Jian Yao's nervousness. He simply muttered, "No need. You eat it yourself." After a pause, he added, "You're so thin, just skin and bones." Then, he turned and walked away, as indifferent as the wind. Jian Yao blushed and quickly followed, stammering, "I am naturally skinny. I'm not actually struggling that much, and I eat enough to stay full. You need energy to work after all." She explained herself so earnestly that it became unintentionally amusing. Walking ahead of her, Jaikinglin couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. Jian Yao was stunned. She quickly caught up and tilted her head to get a better look at him. "What are you doing?" "I'm looking at you," Jian Yao blurted out, marveling. "Turns out, you're not as emotionless as I thought." The two stood there, staring at each other in the dim light, until finally, they both burst into laughter. After that night, something seemed to start growing quietly in the cold winter air, alongside the steady patter of rain. Life suddenly seemed more hopeful. Jian Yao worked harder than ever, and by the end of the year, she was awarded an Outstanding Employee Award. It was given by the headquarters of the maternity and baby supply chain, where she worked. Usually, such awards went to the store managers, but this year, they made an exception for one of their employees. Jian Yao was overjoyed and completely missed the envious looks from her manager. After work, she immediately bought a new winter coat for Guogua and then went to the market to pick up some fresh meat. She planned to make dumplings for dinner. Meat had become incredibly expensive that year, and it had been ages since she'd been able to give Guagua a decent meal. The child was at the age where she needed nourishment, and Jian Yao felt a pang of guilt. She couldn't help but think she wasn't a very good mother. When the dumplings were finally served, Guogua was over the moon, as if celebrating the new year early. She ate with delight, her face beaming, and even made a point of thanking Jian Yao. "Mom, today is the happiest day of my life. I have new clothes to wear and yummy dumplings to eat.
Thank you, Mom.
You're the best mom in the world." Her innocent words tugged at Jian Yao's heartstrings, bringing tears to her eyes. Life had been hard, but heaven hadn't been too cruel. After all, she had the most considerate daughter in the world. "Don't cry, Mom." Guogua wrapped her arms around Jianyao's waist and patted her comfortingly with her small hands. Then, with a hint of a plea in her voice, she looked up at Jianyao. "Mom, can you not go to work tonight?" The little girl's dark eyes sparkled as she whispered, "I actually know every time you leave. I can't sleep, and I get so scared. The night is so dark." "Okay, Mom won't go. I'll stay with you." Jianyao could bear no more. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged her daughter tightly. "I've already taken tonight off. I'm not going to work. I'll stay with you, and I won't go anywhere. Actually, there's one place we need to go. How about we bring some dumplings to the uncle next door?" When Jiqinglin opened the small window on the iron door, all he saw was a beaming little face, Guogua's, bright and cheerful like a sunflower in full bloom. "Uncle, have some dumplings." Jianyao was holding her daughter, and Guogua was holding a plate of dumplings. The scene was a bit comical. Jiqinglin was visibly taken aback. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, a voice came from inside, along with the sound of a wheelchair moving. "Lao Ji, is that our son? Hurry up and open the door. What are you standing there for?" This time it was Jianyao's turn to be stunned. Jiqinglin noticed the confusion in her eyes and pursed his lips. "My mother," he explained briefly. "She has dementia. She gets confused sometimes." The pieces fell into place, and Jianyao understood. But before Jiqinglin could say more, she stepped closer with Guogua and raised her voice to call inside. "Auntie, would you like some dumplings?" The house wasn't large, but it was very tidy. The computer on the desk was still on, showing a half-finished illustration. The colors were soft and beautiful, depicting a young woman from the Republican era holding an umbrella in the rain. The cobblestone path, braided hair, and blooming lilac flowers in the corner of the frame immediately reminded Jianyao of Dai Wangshu's poem Rainy Alley. She turned her head toward Jiqinglin with a look of surprise. "Are you an artist?" Jiqinglin casually closed the artwork and lowered his gaze, his tone indifferent. "Just a hobby. I pick up some commissions here and there to make a bit of money." He was still his usual cold and distant self, like a misty abyss that no one could approach. Jianyao felt a pang of disappointment, but before she could dwell on it, Guogua, always sharp-eyed, spotted the art supplies hidden under the desk and became excited. "Uncle, I love drawing too." The little girl wriggled under the desk, eager to pull out the drawing boards. Jianyao hurried to stop her. "Guogua, that's rude. You couldn't blame the child for being so excited." Guogua had a natural talent for art, something even her kindergarten teachers praised. But Jianyao couldn't afford to send her to art classes or buy expensive supplies, so she had to make do with letting her draw in cheap notebooks. Now, seeing such a treasure trove of professional art supplies, Guogua's eyes lit up like she had found a chest full of gold. Unable to contain her curiosity, Guogua picked up a brush and refused to put it down. Jianyao stood awkwardly by, but Jiqinglin simply sat down on the floor beside the child, naturally picking up another brush. There are many ways to draw a fish in the water. It can blow bubbles, it can sway its tail, or it can swim against the current and leap out, just like a bird flying in the sky. His low voice, imbued with a kind of magical charm, turned the explanation into a whimsical lesson on art. Jianyao stood to the side, wide-eyed in disbelief at how the usually stoic, white-haired ice block was now so patient and gentle. Outside, the rain and wind howled, but inside, it was peaceful and warm. Jianyao fed dumplings to the elderly lady while Jiqinglin taught Guogua how to draw. Everything felt so perfect, like a beautiful dream from the Republican era. After both the elderly woman and Guogua had fallen asleep, Jianyao and Jiqinglin sat by the window, sharing the last 2 cold dumplings. Jianyao giggled to herself, nibbling on her dumpling as she made small talk. "So, that thug seems to have moved out. He's not living here anymore." "Yes, I know." Jiqinglin finished his dumpling in a few bites, his expression calm. He must have looked into my background and got scared. Yeah, scared, so he moved out, Jian Yao echoed absentmindedly, then suddenly froze. Wait, what background? What background are you talking about? Jai Qinglin's dark eyes were as deep as ink. Are you really? Jian Yao's breathing quickened. Jai Qinglin gazed at her silently, his expression calm, before speaking each word clearly. Yes, I really went to prison, and it really was for murder. Anything else you'd like to ask? Jian Yao's hands began to tremble involuntarily. Sensing her reaction, Jai Qinglin's lips curled into a cold smile. You're afraid now, aren't you? No, it's not that. I just can't believe it. Jian Yao shook her head hurriedly, her eyes misting with tears. Because you're such a good person. Jai Qinglin looked into her eyes, seeing the light that flickered within. He was silent for a long while before finally speaking again. Being a good person doesn't mean you can't end up in prison. He let out a soft sigh, his white hair gleaming like frost. I may be a good person, but I'm certainly not a lucky one. That thug only found out I went to prison for murder. He doesn't know why I was released early. There's a lot in this world you can uncover by simply digging. He probably never imagined that the reason I was released early is because it was a miscarriage of justice. I spent 14 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit before my name was cleared, and I was finally set free. Before Jai Qinglin was 16, he was the best student in the middle school in the small county. He was the class monitor, versatile, handsome, and sunny. There were countless girls in the school who secretly admired him. At that time, his future was bright, and it was not an exaggeration to describe him as a prodigy. Unfortunately, when he was 16, his life full of flowers came to an abrupt end, and he fell into a nightmare from which there was no escape. A female corpse who had been raped and murdered was found in a public toilet near the school. A passerby testified that he saw a tall student wearing the uniform of the 3rd middle school at that time. I don't know why the police found me at that time. I just went home on the weekend, and the police came to me when I went to school for evening self-study later. In that era, there was no surveillance, no advanced case-handling equipment, and even the judicial system was not perfect. There were many policemen who were idle and just wanted to close the case hastily and catch someone to take over. It was almost the new year, and every household was very busy, but suddenly such a big case happened. The county was very anxious from top to bottom, and a deadline was set. The case must be solved as soon as possible, otherwise no one would have a good new year. In the small county at that time, many police officers were not of high quality, and some were even more like hooligans than hooligans. They had plenty of ways to deal with a student who had not yet entered society. After rounds of torture, the case was finally solved, and everyone could have a good new year. Except Jai Qinglin's parents and relatives. It's so ironic. Just because of one vague witness statement, I became the perpetrator of a rape and murder case. My parents couldn't lift their heads in the county, and my grandparents passed away in the 2nd year of my imprisonment. All I could see back then was a small, square patch of sky above me. I knew my life was over, but I couldn't accept it. I told my parents I was innocent, that I had been wronged and had never committed such a horrific crime. They believed me and started fighting for my appeal. It took 7 years in total. Over that time, 4 of my closest family members passed away, and my father, he was the 4th. The year he died, my hair turned completely white. Jai Qinglin recounted his story calmly, without a hint of emotion in his voice, yet the grief and cold despair were palpable, an indescribable sorrow etched into his bones. There were moments when I thought about ending it all, but then my mother came to visit me. By then, she had already lost her sanity, at least to some degree. But she kept telling me to hold on no matter what. She said I would eventually clear my name and prove my innocence. She said I was all she had left in this world. If I gave up, she wouldn't have any reason to keep living. So, I stayed up one night, staring at the ceiling, wide awake until the morning. I watched a spider spinning its web in the corner of my eye, and through the window, I saw the sunlight slowly rise. After that night, I began to study law. I realized I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to rely on myself. I had to fight to overturn my own conviction. The rain continued to beat against the windows as Jian Yao's vision blurred with tears. That calm voice still echoed through the room. The year I was released, I had just turned 30. The ancients say that by 30, a man should be well established. But for a long time, I felt like I was still stuck in that winter when I was 16. The world had changed so quickly, far beyond anything I could have imagined while I was in prison. It felt like I hadn't just lost 14 years of freedom, I had missed out on an entirely new world. Everything was so unfamiliar. You'll probably laugh when I say this, but at first, I didn't even know how to turn on the lights in a hotel room. Don't even mention all the dazzling high-tech gadgets that I couldn't understand. And then there were the trending topics, the modern lifestyles. I knew nothing about any of it. It felt like I had landed on an alien planet. But thankfully, I'm a fast learner. At this, Jai Qinglin raised his eyes slightly, his tone carrying a hint of teasing. Using today's slang, you could say I used to be a straight-A student. He gave a small smile, and Jian Yao mirrored it, though she couldn't bring herself to laugh. Look at me now. I can even use a computer to draw, and I get paid for it. Not bad, right? People say that art requires time and patience, two things I had in abundance during those years in prison. I drew almost every corner of that prison. But now that I'm out, I can finally draw other landscapes and other people. As he said this, Jai Qinglin glanced at Jian Yao. Her soft, cloud-like hair seemed to carry the delicate fragrance of lilac blossoms. When I was 16, I had many dreams. I wanted to go to the best university to get the most prestigious job. But now, after living through half of my life, I've realized that being able to look up at a vast, open sky, to breathe free air, and to push my mother for a walk under the trees on a sunny day, that's happiness too, don't you think? And the white-haired man smiled gently at Jian Yao, his voice full of warmth, being able to sit here and eat dumplings with you. When Jai Qinglin received Jian Yao's phone call, it was already 10 o'clock at night. He was busy making a wooden rocking horse for Guogua. All he had to do was add a layer of colorful paint, and it would be ready. Ever since that night, he had shared his past with her. Their hearts had clearly drawn closer together. Something seemed to be quietly blossoming in the cold winter night as their connection deepened. Guogua's admiration for Jai Qinglin was unhidden. Not only did he become her master, but he also took on the task of escorting her to and from kindergarten. The children at the kindergarten were fearless. Instead of being intimidated by his white hair, they praised his artistic talent, crowding around him and saying, "Guogua, your dad is amazing. He looks like a superhero from the comics." Jian Yao would often visit Jai Qinglin's mother, helping her with massages and keeping her company. The elderly lady would sometimes be lucid and at other times confused, but when she was aware, she would grab Jian Yao's hand and smile, praising how clever and capable Jai Qinglin was. Jian Yao would smile back, but she often looked down, her cheeks tinged with embarrassment. "Auntie, I already know how wonderful he is. I'm more aware than anyone." Everything seemed to be improving, and life was getting better. Just before the new year, Jian Yao received a call she hadn't expected. Crying on the other end, she told Jai Qinglin, "I'm so scared, so scared." Jai Qinglin leapt to his feet. "Jian Yao, don't cry. Where are you? What happened?" "I'm at the police station." Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with helplessness and panic. "The store manager accused me of stealing, but I didn't do it. I've been wronged." The word wronged hit Jai Qinglin like a hammer. No one knew that feeling better than him. He rushed to the police station, where he found Jian Yao sitting on a bench, curled up and trembling, her nose red from crying, looking like a small, scared animal. Just like back then when he was dragged into the police station, he was struck by a wave of compassion and memories. Jian Yao looked up, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to freeze. In that instant, it was just the two of them. She had held back her tears, but now, seeing him, all her feelings came rushing out. "I swear I didn't do it really," she pleaded, shaking her head. Jai Qinglin stepped closer, his expression gentle yet firm. I know. Don't be afraid. I'm here. This so-called theft case was actually quite simple. A customer had purchased a toy from a maternity store, something akin to an electronic drawing board with various functions, and it wasn't cheap. However, a few days after taking it home, the customer found that her child had no interest in the new toy. She wanted to return it, but since it had been used and the tags were removed, the store's policy wouldn't allow a refund. The customer was a bit frustrated, but Jian Yao became intrigued and suggested, "Could you sell it to me at a lower price?" Jian Yao thought of Guogua, who loved drawing. She wanted to buy the electronic drawing board as a New Year's gift for her, certain it would make the child happy. It seemed like a win-win situation, but after the customer left and Jian Yao had packed up the toy, ready to clock out, the store manager showed up. Ever since the last Employee of the Month award had gone to Jian Yao, the manager had been harboring a grudge. But with Jian Yao's diligent work, there hadn't been much reason to target her, until this theft incident happened. No matter how much Jian Yao tried to explain, the manager insisted that she had stolen the toy and she was taken directly to the police station. The store surveillance cameras happened to be broken and the customer's phone was unreachable. Jian Yao and the manager ended up spending hours at the police station. The manager sternly claimed the matter was serious, demanding Jian Yao be fired and even threatened to have her jailed. Completely overwhelmed, Jian Yao finally called Ji Qinglin. Ji Qinglin had assumed Jian Yao was working the night shift at the convenience store. He never expected she'd be facing a humiliating interrogation. After understanding the whole situation, Ji Qinglin didn't say much. He simply walked straight up to the female manager. Are the surveillance cameras really broken? The manager, a middle-aged woman wearing bright red lipstick, was much more composed compared to Jian Yao's disheveled state. Faced with Ji Qinglin's question, she stood up immediately, her eyes sharp. What do you mean? Are you accusing me of lying to the police? You know whether you're lying or not, Ji Qinglin said coldly, each word resonating clearly in the police station. I'm just reminding you, lying to the police, hiding evidence, and framing others are all legal offenses. You'd better think twice before you say something that might get you in trouble. The store manager was visibly intimidated by Ji Qinglin's presence. After a brief pause, she stammered, Who do you think you are? Trying to scare me. I've studied law for nearly 10 years. What do you think? Ji Qinglin didn't answer directly, but his words were enough to make her face turn pale. No way, Jian Yao. This is just a small misunderstanding. And you brought a lawyer? What? Are you really planning to sue me? Why wouldn't we? Ji Qinglin's gaze was as sharp as a blade, his white hair adding to his imposing demeanor. Do you think this police station belongs to you? After falsely accusing someone and causing all this trouble, you think you can just walk away without any consequences? Jian Yao, make the call, he said, without looking back. Jian Yao, still sitting on the bench, was startled. Call who? Call the neighbor of that customer. Ji Qinglin responded calmly and directly. Didn't you say she came to buy the toy because her neighbor recommended it? Both of them bought something from you, and you registered both as members. You should have their contact information, right? Get her neighbor to knock on her door and bring her here. This matter isn't ending today. Whoever falsely accused someone will pay the price. Either they resign or wait for a lawyer's notice and face the court. Ji Qinglin's resolute words echoed throughout the police station. The store manager, clearly shaken, wobbled on her feet and then collapsed into her chair. After everything was settled and they stepped out of the police station, it was nearly midnight. The streets were deserted, with hardly a soul in sight. Snowflakes drifted down, the streetlights casting a silver glow on the ground. Ji Qinglin took off his coat and wrapped it around Jian Yao. Before he could say anything, Jian Yao buried her face in his chest, tears streaming down her face. She held him so tightly, as if he were her only anchor in the world, her warm tears soaking through his shirt and mingling with the sound of his heartbeat. It's okay. We can go home now. Ji Qinglin's nose felt a bit tingly. He gently patted her back, speaking softly, as if soothing a child. Jian Yao looked up, gazing deeply into his eyes, and suddenly called his name softly through the wind and snow. Ji Qinglin. I'm here. Their eyes locked, and Jian Yao's expression was serious, each word drifting delicately into Ji Qinglin's heart. Ji Qinglin, let's give each other a home, okay? That must have been the most beautiful confession Ji Qinglin had ever heard that winter. To build a home together, such a thought had never crossed his mind before. He had long given up on the idea of love and never imagined a woman would want to marry him. Until he met Jian Yao. Happiness came unexpectedly, but so did challenges. With only 2 weeks until the new year, one afternoon while picking Guoguo up from kindergarten, Ji Qinglin spotted a bespectacled man pulling Jian Yao outside. Yao Yao, don't be angry. Come back with me, please. The man was well-dressed, looking refined and scholarly. In an instant, Ji Qinglin recognized him. Sure enough, the next moment, the man dropped to his knees in front of Jian Yao, pleading, Yao Yao, I've been looking for you everywhere. Let's remarry. I can't live without you. People started gathering in the hallway, but the man held onto Jian Yao tightly, oblivious to the onlookers, his affection palpable. Get away from me. Jian Yao pushed him away, but looked up to see Ji Qinglin nearby. The man turned and suddenly exclaimed, Guoguo, I'm your daddy. Come here to daddy. Ji Qinglin felt a tightness in his chest as he noticed the fear in Guoguo's eyes. She instinctively hid behind him, refusing to approach the man claiming to be her father.
Who are you?
Why are you holding my daughter? The man stood up, hostility written all over his face as he glared at Ji Qinglin. Then he looked back at Jian Yao, a realization dawning on him. He nodded, a strange smile creeping onto his face. I get it now. This is why you wouldn't come back with me? As he swayed slightly, Ji Qinglin sensed something was off. Suddenly, the man raised his hand, intending to slap Jian Yao. Ah! Jian Yao barely had time to react, instinctively covering her head. But the anticipated blow never landed. When she dared to peek, she saw Ji Qinglin's white hair blocking her view. Ji Qinglin had firmly grasped the man's wrist, twisting it effortlessly until the man's face turned red. His cold, lethal voice echoed in the hallway. If you dare to touch her, I'll break your arm. Do you believe me? Everyone has a past, and Ji Qinglin spent over a decade in prison, while Jian Yao wasted her youth on that bastard, Xia Fan. They grew up in the same place, attending school together since childhood, and were childhood sweethearts who had shared innocent moments of love. It was so beautiful that in their senior year of high school, Jian Yao gave up a life-changing opportunity for Xia Fan. At that time, a kind-hearted person came to their school to sponsor a student for college. Each class had only one slot, which was originally Jian Yao's. She let it go to Xia Fan, who ranked second. He told me his family couldn't afford to send him to school, and he really needed this chance. He promised he would cherish it, study hard in college, find a good job after graduation, and that he would never let me down. He swore he would treat me well. I didn't have anyone to support me after my parents passed away, and I was young and naive, valuing emotions above all else. Later, even his mother came to persuade me, and I foolishly gave up that precious opportunity. I didn't take the college entrance exam. I went straight to work and even sent Xia Fan some money every month. I was so naive. As long as he was doing well, I would be happy. I always thought if I married him, we'd have a warm home. All the hardships I faced were worth it. But human hearts are hard to read. Xia Fan's mother regretted her previous words. What once sounded so beautiful became pure disdain for Jian Yao. Her son graduated from a prestigious university, handsome and talented, with a bright future ahead. Why should he marry a high school graduate? Xia Fan listened to his mother, but didn't want to give me up. I was fed up and thought about leaving, but at that time, I found out that I was pregnant. That spring, the two young people ended up getting married. But 6 months later, Jian Yao gave birth to a daughter, marking the start of her nightmare. During my postpartum confinement, his mother constantly berated me at the door, hurling insults I can't even bear to recall. Xia Fan always sided with her, telling me not to take it to heart and that if I had a son, his mother would be happy. As she spoke, a cold smile crept onto Jian Yao's lips. His mother would be satisfied? What about me? What about Guogua? Jian Yao never became pregnant again. Her health had always been poor, and with her mother-in-law's constant pressure, her condition worsened. Guogua, too, seemed to suffer for unknown reasons, frequently falling ill and developing more slowly than her peers. I took care of Guogua day and night, but she didn't improve. Eventually, I had my suspicions and took her to the best pediatric hospital for a full examination. Do you know what the diagnosis was? Jian Yao trembled uncontrollably, summoning all her strength to deliver the shocking revelation. It was because that heartless old woman, she actually used a 5-centimeter needle to jab into Guogua's forehead when she was just 6 days old. In the countryside, due to the preference for boys over girls, there's a superstitious and cruel belief. After a baby girl is born, a needle is stabbed into her head to ensure she dies in extreme agony. This horrific act is believed to scare away future baby girls, ensuring that the next child will be a son. Xia Fan's mother intended to use this brutal method to harm her own granddaughter. Fortunately, Jian Yao took good care of her child and discovered the problem in time, getting the needle removed at the hospital before irreversible damage was done. At that time, I was nearly going crazy, but his mother insisted she didn't mean to hurt anyone. Guogua is fine now. The needle was taken out, she said. I wanted to tear her apart and report her to the police for her cruelty. Jian Yao recalled, her tears streaming down her cheeks. But Xia Fan panicked. He begged me not to, and when he saw I wouldn't back down, he turned violent, grabbing my hair and slamming my head against the wall, beating me severely. She clutched her palms tightly, gazing into the void as memories of those hellish days flooded back. Xia Fan was so good at pretending. He appeared polite and charming in public, and his colleagues and neighbors couldn't believe he was capable of domestic violence. When the police came, he and his mother deceived them, twisting the truth and saying I was suffering from postpartum depression, that I was being unreasonable and delusional. They claimed everything I said was fabricated. The term domestic violence has gained attention in recent years. According to the All China Women's Federation, 30% of married women in China have experienced domestic violence. A woman is assaulted by her husband every 7.4 seconds, resulting in about 157,000 annual suicides, with 60% attributed to domestic violence. Moreover, 40% of murder cases involving women are related to family abuse. These shocking statistics continue to rise, and domestic violence often fails to receive serious attention. A simple phrase like family dispute can dismiss the victim's plight. Finally, feeling cornered, Jian Yao decided to take action. I filed for divorce, but Xia Fan naturally refused. He hired the best lawyer to argue that I only had a high school diploma, that I was unfit to raise our child, and even accused me of having bipolar disorder, claiming Guogua couldn't stay with me. If I wanted to take Guogua with me, I had to sign a settlement agreement to leave with nothing, or he would take custody of the child and I'd never see her again. Xia Fan thought this would intimidate Jian Yao and scare her away from the idea of divorce. After all, a woman leaving with nothing would find it incredibly difficult to raise a child on her own. He was sure she wouldn't sign the agreement, unwilling to give up her daughter. What he didn't realize was how strong Jian Yao's determination was. She was willing to pay any price to leave him and escape that hellish home with Guogua. I left with nothing but Guogua. I finally escaped that nightmare. I won't let my daughter suffer even a little, no matter how hard it gets for me. After the divorce, Xia Fan regretted it and searched for Jian Yao everywhere. In fact, he had always harbored a twisted possessiveness over her. After graduating from a prestigious university, his mother tried to find him a wealthy woman to marry, but he hesitated, still unable to let go of Jian Yao. After all, the bond formed from years of growing up together was not easily severed. This could be called a kind of love, but it was a distorted love. After every time he abused Jian Yao, he would fall to the ground, crying and begging her not to leave him, only to turn around and do it again, continuing the cycle of violence and repentance. Such a terrifying man, such a twisted love. Jian Yao could no longer endure it. She wanted to escape as far away as possible, never to see that devil again. Over the years, she hid with her daughter, constantly on edge. Just when she thought she had found a better life with Ji Qinglin, Xia Fan found her again. Jian Yao's frail body trembled, her hands covering her face, tears streaming through her fingers as all her heartache poured out. Then, a pair of arms wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her into a warm embrace. Ji Qinglin stood there, resting his chin on her head, speaking softly yet earnestly. "Jian Yao, let's get our marriage certificate." She trembled in his embrace, her muffled sobs breaking through. I'm not healthy. I might not be able to have another child for you, but we already have one." Ji Qinglin smiled, lifting her chin so their eyes met. "Even the kindergarten kids know I'm Guoguo's dad. She's my daughter, isn't she?" They gazed into each other's eyes for what felt like an eternity, before Jian Yao buried her head in Ji Qinglin's chest, tears falling freely. They held each other tightly in the cold winter night, their heartbeats resonating as if they were never to part again. If you hadn't spent those years in prison, and I hadn't been with Xia Fan, we could have met much earlier. It's not too late now. In the vast sea of people, they finally found each other. How wondrous fate can be. You are the light that redeems me, and I am the gentle spring breeze over your barren heart. How fortunate we are to have met in this endless crowd, two battered souls embracing one another, making the night feel a little less cold, and the pain of the past feel a little less sharp. Because in this world, there is you, and there is me. We have each other. On the last working day before the new year, Jian Yao and Ji Qinglin went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get their marriage certificate. The family of four headed to the market to shop for New Year goods. As the lights twinkled and the bustling atmosphere filled the air, Ji Qinglin held Guoguo's hand while Jian Yao pushed the wheelchair of the elderly lady. Suddenly, both of their phones buzzed simultaneously. "I've become the store manager." The compensation finally came through. After reading the messages, Jian Yao and Ji Qinglin turned to each other, their smiles almost identical. "What compensation?" Jian Yao asked, puzzled. Ji Qinglin smiled, looking up at the sky as he exhaled deeply. "It's the state compensation for my years in prison." He hadn't mentioned it before, not to hide it from her, but to give her a pleasant surprise on this cold winter day. "Once the holiday is over, let's go house hunting. If the money isn't enough, we can buy something smaller. As long as we're together, it's all good, right?" As the cold wind brushed past, Jian Yao gazed at Ji Qinglin's smiling face, tears welling in her eyes. She nodded, squeezing his hand tighter. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. Upon answering, her expression quickly turned cold. Ji Qinglin sensed something was off. He could hear crying on the other end, but Jian Yao impatiently interrupted, "You've got the wrong person." She hung up without hesitation, deleting the call and blocking the number with swift efficiency. "Who was it?" Ji Qinglin asked softly. Jian Yao continued to stroll through the market, her mood unaffected. "Xia Fan's mom. He got drunk, had an accident, and is in the hospital. She's begging me to come back and take care of him." The bitter and cruel woman had called, sobbing uncontrollably, pleading for Jian Yao to remarry Xia Fan and take care of him for the rest of his life, even offering to apologize. "Old ties? I've already shown enough mercy by not suing them. Want me to go back?" "That's a dream," Jian Yao scoffed, her demeanor no longer that of a weak woman but rather fierce and unyielding. Ji Qinglin couldn't help but laugh. "Aren't you going to visit him in the hospital?" Jian Yao shook her head, her tone icy. "Maybe they can let me know when his funeral is. I'll definitely send a gift." There's too much talk of repaying kindness, with stories and shows urging people to be forgiving and selfless.
But why?
If one repays kindness with enmity, what should be done for kindness? Now, Jian Yao only wanted to look forward, to build a happy life with Guogua and Ji Qinglin, caring for the elderly lady and nurturing their hard-earned new family, cherishing this long-awaited happiness. She didn't want to think about anything else, nor did she need to. The cold wind ruffled her clothes, but gripping the strong hand of the man beside her, she felt warmth. Guogua lifted her little head and excitedly pointed at the dancing lanterns ahead.
Daddy, look.
The fish is flying in the sky. Ji Qinglin chuckled, patting the child's head. Yes, it's flying so high. I'll make you a big fish like that one day, okay? Guogua jumped around the wheelchair as if she were riding that big fish, soaring through the sky and exploring the world freely. Fireworks burst overhead as Ji Qinglin and Jian Yao exchanged smiles, their eyes sparkling. The new year was finally here, and it felt wonderful.